Back at it here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. Soren Petro, Rany Jazayerli with you. The good doctor, Rany Jazayerli. Going to discuss how you could possibly turn around and now lose to the A's, a team that doesn't even seem to want to win. Maybe is incentivizing their losing to get out of Oakland, yet the Royals dropped 2 out of 3 to the A's. How low is it now? How far from contending are the Royals? What pieces are in place? What do they still need? We'll get into that here tonight. Also, the new pitching approach. Is it actually working down in the minor leagues? Can we find a spot where it's starting to look a little bit brighter? Is Prado here to stay? What other interesting minor league moves might be coming in? Of course, the minor league minute. It's all coming your way here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more info. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
And welcome. If you're catching us via the podcast later on, remember you can be a part of the conversation by joining us on the stream. We do it live, mostly on Sundays at about 10 p.m. Central. We did this week anyway, so you can be a part of the conversation on the Facebook, the YouTube, the Twitter, the LinkedIn, the Twitch. It's all there. Just make sure you follow Rany and I on Twitter, and you will see where all you can go. And Rany, first of all, right? Like, it's just the A's. It's just another series lost. The A's have been a good franchise, right? This shouldn't be that big of a turd in the punch bowl for Royals fans, should it?
Soren, let me tell you something. No one comes into Kauffman Stadium and sweeps the Royals when they have quite possibly the worst pitching staff of any major league team in the last century. They might win the series, but they will not sweep the Royals in Kauffman Stadium. All right, this is our house, and we will defend it occasionally.
Okay.
If the stars align. If the Royals had lost today, they would have had a worse record than the Oakland A's, which right now the Oakland A's aren't so much a baseball team as a cynical land grab by their owner, who's going completely Rachel Phelps on the league and throwing a hissy fit trying to get a new ballpark. And if he doesn't get it, he's going to move the team to Las Vegas. And they still were this close to moving ahead of the Kansas City Royals in the standings. Not a great week, Soren. Not a great week. Just like last week and the week before and the week before that.
Do you buy the Buddy Bell? It can always get worse, or is this rock bottom?
I have so many times thought that this time Buddy Bell was wrong, that it can't get worse. And every single time I've been proven wrong. So I am not about to say things can't get worse. Buddy Bell, one of the wisest pieces of advice I have ever heard is that quote, because as a Royals fan, every time you think you've hit rock bottom, you find that they can keep digging. So here we are. 8-26 now, 9-26, tied for the worst record in the history of the franchise after 35 games, tied with the 2005 Kansas City Royals, the 2006 Kansas City Royals. The franchise, the team that finally got Allard Baird fired, had a better record after 35 games than this team.
How about
Not
this,
great.
Matt? Are you guys concerned that the show might soon be flagged as inappropriate? At some point, is talking about the Royals this much tantamount to tragedy porn?
Tragedy porn. I like that. That is that we should put that as the as the hashtag for this show. Put that in the show notes. The best tragedy porn on the Kansas City Royals. Um, we're just the messenger guys. Sorry, but you convinced me to start podcasting with you. You made it. I'll give Soren. For everyone listening, I'll give Soren all the credit. I told you I didn't have time. You made it as easy as possible for me. You handle everything on the front end, the back end. You tape it, you put it up, you promote it. All I have to do, you told me all I have to do 1 hour a week, sit down with you and talk Royals baseball. I thought, how hard can this be? I
Right,
follow this team. You've made it as easy as possible. You've been a man of your word.
right.
And this is still so painful for me because I actually have to follow this team closely, which is something I've been doing for 40 years, something I've been doing since I was a child. And I did it because it was fun. I'm not sure it's fun anymore, Soren. Like we got rid of Cal Eldred and here we are. It's like, what more are we supposed to do? So,
Um, I hear you. You know, listen, it is like maybe it's because I have followed this team like this for so long, right? There's no getting away from it. Although I will say this, um, I like this one here. James says maybe one week we take a break from the pain of Royals baseball and you guys sweep through the rest of the league. Similar, inversely to how the rest of the league sweeps through the Royals. Listen, I do get it, and I will say that it is a little bit different. Like in the past, I think resurrection in from 13 to 17, fans were still kind of into talking about it. I mean, we obviously we tap, the fans that are interested right now. And I think there are many Royals fans that are diehards and they stay with the club. But the casual fans, there was even an element of a casual fan, like take a look at it or something. And casual fans have even learned, I think that's been the worst part for the Royals is that casual fans are like, oh no, good baseball is possible in this town. Like there was an element of like after 30 years that like you just couldn't do it in the small market. So let's just be happy that some big league ball players come through and play in our park, and we'll kind of follow it and keep up with it. I think now people are like, nah, wake me when it gets good again. I've tasted the good stuff. I'm not gonna deal with the bad stuff. And so I think that's frustrating. And so I do get your emotions with it. I mean, there are times that I'm like,
but
but again, I understand it, but I'm physically conditioned and mentally
right.
conditioned to follow
But
you.
conversely, let's keep in mind that the Royals fans also proved in that 2013-2017 span that they will absolutely come out for a
Sure.
competitive team, right? Like there can be no doubt, and I think it's important just an ownership perspective that this isn't a Sisyphean task. Like if you build it, they will come.
Right.
Saturday there were 29,500 people listed attendance for one of the smallest markets in baseball, one of the worst teams in baseball, just to honor a player who had retired, who wasn't playing, just to come out and show their love to Lorenzo Cain, just to have one last connection to that two-time pennant-winning world championship team. The fans are desperate for a winner. They will
Uh,
come out. And so there's no excuse to not invest in this team to build a winner.
let me preface my next statement by saying, listen, I'm very impressed by the fans that did come out, and I'm thrilled for Lorenzo Cain that they had a moment for him and everything. But I'm going to tell you that we got to a point where honoring the '85 Royals was a four-letter word before 2013, 14, 15 rolled around. Like that was the kind of thing that I was so sick of, that the Royals were, well, let's throw back to '85 to try to get some goodwill. And like if that's what this becomes, like every year there's a new 2015, a way to rekindle 2015, I will quickly begin to dump on that. This is the first go round of it, so
Right.
it's
Well,
fine.
and here's the thing. I would say if you get sick of it, if you feel like it's leaving a bad taste in your mouth, I don't think it's a reflection of honoring that team. It's a reflection of how bad the current team is. Every organization honors their champ. When you have a world championship team, pretty much every team in baseball will have a 10-year anniversary reunion of that team. So in 2025, when the Royals have a 10-year reunion, because at that point, Moustakas will probably be retired. Heck, Eric Hosmer might be, the only player left who might be active from that team might be Salvador Perez, who will still be in a Royals uniform. Like, the fault of honoring that team won't be, oh, that we're hung up on nostalgia. The fault of honoring that team will be that they have shown no ability to replicate.
Yeah, and that's what it was before. It's all they had. All they had was 1985. It was literally nothing for decades of Royals baseball.
Right, but
And
you can chew gum and walk at the same time. Like, you can
yeah,
honor them and still build a good team.
I'm not lobbying for sucking. Okay, I think you're the only one that's taking it that way. My point is that it frightens me. The Lorenzo Cain, like everybody in there being excited about Cain, I get it. I'm not chastising people for being upset about or being excited about Lorenzo Cain. I'm simply saying this is the first really scary sign, right? You can need to rebuild. You can be bad at rebuilding. You can be bad at rebuilding the rebuild. But when it starts to become, if it is not, it is not there yet, but if it starts to become, the bobblehead is a 2015 and everything is about 2015, then at that point, fundamentally as an organization, you really, and this is where I think the Royals were during the committee and in the early days of the glass run organization. They were not about trying to win. They'd given up on it. So I'm simply pointing this out as a cautionary tale. This is a sign. This is the first time we've had to be like, oh, it's nice to remember 15. Yeah, don't get too excited about it, and don't celebrate it too much, because organizations start to use it as a crutch. I watched it. I did the pre and post where 4 times a year they found a way to somehow commemorate 1985. It blows. It blows.
It does blow, but it is downstream of the losing. Like, the scary thing to me isn't what, this is the first sign of it with Lawrence. The scary thing is they're 8-26, 9-26. That's the scary part.
Right. And let's focus on that. And losing to the A's. Is this anything more than baseball happens, or is this a sign that as piss poor as the A's have been, they're better than the Royals?
No, I mean, if you just look at the run differential, the A's are an abomination. The Royals have the second worst ERA in the league at like 5.81 coming in today. The A's were over 7, and the Royals scored in the series. I mean, the Royals scored 17 runs in the 3 games, which is below the A's average for the year, their pitching staff. But I'm not going to be upset about scoring 17 runs. The problem is they couldn't pitch. The problem is Brad Keller is even worse, even more of a frustrating conundrum than he's been for the last couple of years. And Brady Sinker looks completely lost right now. Right, though it's those specific issues today. This is, we saw what happens when you play a bad team. Where you got Ryan Yarbrough going out there and looking like a major league pitcher and getting the win, and Roldis Chapman bounced back. I think what he showed earlier this week when he struggled was that pitching on back-to-back days for him, his velocity was down. And I think, especially if you want to keep his trade value up, I think the Royals need to be careful to just let him pitch on at least one day of rest. And teams will still value that as long as they see he's throwing 100, even if they can't use him every day. He'll bring back something. Scott Barlow seems to be rounding into shape a little bit, which is good. So I'm not losing 2 out of 3. It's annoying. It's frustrating. That's not that it's just psychologically. Yeah, it's just baseball. It's not. I mean, it's the fact. The problem is that 2 out of 3. Losing 2 out of 3 is improvement for the Royals compared to the first 32 games this year.
Well, and as a couple of people noted, I mean, they scored runs, right? They scored runs and they still managed to lose 2 out of 3. That's the frustrating part of the equation, which is also baseball. When you score 8, you give up 9, and when you only give up 2, you only score 1. That is sometimes the hard part about baseball. But no, I don't think it's any far-reaching, sign about what's where these two franchises are, but it is so frustrating because it begins the run. They're now 3 into the 18 of 24 against bad teams, and they're 1-2. Right, that's a frustrating part of the equation.
If they're going to make a move, it needs to be in May. I mean, the one saving grace,
respectability, not towards contention. I know you're
no, just towards, like, maybe not losing 100 games this year, yes. Right? I mean, their schedule has been quite difficult. Like they played, I think, maybe one team with a losing record prior to the A series. But May they have their opportunity to have a winning month maybe, or be 12-14 and at least look respectable. So, but yeah, they did not get off to a good start in that regard.
The Kaufman Corner podcast proudly brought to you by GAN Asphalt and Concrete. Did you know that GAN is hiring right now? If you want to be a part of one of the fastest growing, best companies in Kansas City, they're hiring for all positions right now. Project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members, starting pay up to $30 per hour based upon experience. Paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GANasphalt.com for more information. Rany, how far is this team? Like, what pieces are in place? We thought we'd maybe kind of take a look and say, okay, this is in place. I believe in this. This is here. What's in place for this team? You want to start with something that you think is in place for when this team is contending?
Well, let me start by answering your first question, which is how far is this team? Okay, before the season, I was saying that I honestly felt this team should be competitive next year. Maybe not in the playoffs, but above 500.
Next year being 24.
That was what we were saying 6 weeks ago. I'm, of course, not saying that now. And I'm not even going to say 2025. This has been a rough 6 weeks. And rough enough that I may have to push that back 2 years. I am not going to push it past 2026. I'm not going to say the
Why? Because that's what you think should happen, or that's what you think is actually on the roster in the organization.
I would say both, but I would say primarily because I don't think any team is more than 3 years with competent management. Like, I don't want to give the Royals a pass now suddenly for once again taking a step back and starting over the rebuilding process. Because if you look at even the king of all tank jobs in baseball over the last 20 years, you look at the Houston Astros that hit rock bottom in 2011, starting 3 consecutive seasons. I think they lost 110 games. 106, 107, and 111 games. They averaged 109 losses over a 3-year span. The new GM came in 2012. They had nothing. They had Jose Altuve. Okay, so you talk about what's on the roster. They had Jose Altuve. All right, they were in the playoffs in 3 years. All right, the Chicago Cubs, Theo Epstein and Jed Hoyer were hired after the 2011 season. They started like the Cubs were kind of like the Royals, where they were tanking without actually trying to tank. Theo and Jed said, no, we're actually going to tank. And for 2 years, the team sucked. By the end of 2013, I know Cubs fans were getting very frustrated. 2014, you started seeing the green shoots. 2015, they made the playoffs. 3 years. The first thing I want to do is I want to end this defeatist attitude from Royals fans, or from, more importantly, the Royals front office, that, we need 4 or 5. No, 3 years maximum, because there's more talent on this team than the 2011 Astros. All right. And this idea, well, maybe the Royals we're secretly tanking this year. That's still kind of a hypothetical. We spent the last couple episodes talking about what if the Royals are really tanking. Well, what if they weren't? Because if they were really tanking, there are some decisions they wouldn't have made here. There would be players, they would have moved a lot more guys. But to move on to the pieces that are here that I think will be here in 3. So that's part of the reason you have to put a timetable on it, is to say, okay, who's under contract in 2026 that I think will be, move a team forward towards contention. I think you start with Vinny. You can add Bobby Witt to that. Frankly, those are the only 2 guys I am certain of. There are a lot of other guys who maybe even more than 50-50, but the 2 guys that I have like confidence in, it's just those 2. Okay. And that's sad. There are some other guys that we should talk about as to whether or not, the Royals should build around the next tier of players.
Right. So if I were to look at it, I agree that those 2 are the only 2 that lock it up, even though there is still is it 3 more? There's not 3 more years on Salvi's deal. 2 more years?
They have a club option for 2026. And actually, if you want to talk about, he had a great game today. He's what, 33 now. It's actually really impressive how well he is aging. That year that he missed with Tommy John surgery, you never want to miss a season. I honestly think it might have been the best thing for his health.
I don't know if it was you guys, by the way, Randy, of course, one of the founders of Baseball Prospectus. I remember that was one of the first things I read, and I don't know if it was on your watch when you guys were getting it going and everything, but one of the first things I remember from Baseball Prospectus was somebody did an essay on how the missed time for military service during World War II really helped a lot of pitchers.
Yep. Oh
Right,
yeah.
and, like, people are like, "Oh god, what if he had those other 3 years?" Well, he probably would have blown out 5 years
Right.
before he did, and so that ended up being a good thing, and that maybe even the hitters too. It was mostly about the pitching, but definitely but the hitters had Ted Williams, we always think about the years lost with Ted Williams, in World War II and Korea, and that in actuality may have helped him along the way, and I agree with it. I think that probably did help Salvador
Well, I
Perez.
think the big thing for Salvi, I mean, I don't know, Ted Williams, I think I'd love to have seen what he could have
I
done for
would too.
those 3 years, but he was an outfielder. The thing with Salvi is a catcher who
Yes.
famously caught like every game. Like the Royals were running him into the ground in 2015. I mean, I think he caught the most games of any catcher since like was it Gary Carter in the mid 80s? I mean, he was on a historic pace.
Right.
And he is, that year off rejuvenated his bat. Remember, he came back the following year was the pandemic year. So then he only played, he played almost every game, but it was like 58 games. So he
Right.
went 2 seasons where he only played like 60 games. Actually, he played 37. That's right. He missed he had an eye issue, if I recall. That's right. So he only played, although he hit 333. He had an amazing season. But given that the Royals sucked both of those years,
Yeah.
what is it? It kept him fresh. What does it matter? He was 30 years old in 2020. Since turning 30, so keep this in mind. Salvador Perez in his 20s, his OPS plus was 98. He was basically a league average hitter, but defense, positional value, et cetera, everything else, very valuable player, but a league average hitter. His OPS plus since turning 30 is 125. Like since then, he 30 30 he hit 333 in a short season, set the all-time record for home runs by a primary catcher with 48 while leading the league in RBIs as a catcher in 2021. And then last year, okay, missed a little bit of time, hit 254, slugged 465. His slugging average after his 3-8 game today is what? 516. And he's 33 years old. He's got 2 more guaranteed years, I think at 20 million, 22 million. I was worried when he signed that contract the last 2 years of that deal would be an absolute albatross. Give him all the credit. He takes good care of his health.
Yeah.
He's going to be playable. He may be a little overpaid, but I mean, certainly not to the degree that's going to cripple this franchise by any means. He deserves to
Yeah.
start. He probably deserves to start next year and the year after. By 2026, maybe he's a backup. They have a $13.5 million option, but that contract is not going to hurt the Royals nearly as much as a worst case scenario would have said.
No, I think he's aging well, and I think we'll continue. Now, how much, I think the offense will start to suffer, but let's see how good he ends up being as a defensive catcher. But I think Salvador Perez I will put on that list. And I can see a path to Edward Olivares, but it's as a DH, right?
Right.
I can see a path to MJ Melendez. I think it's as an outfielder, but it might be as a catcher. Like I can't see both, and so that's I can't see. I can't see Oliveras and Melendez. You can't have both of them in the out.
Olivares is a tweener where it's like his glove is not good enough to really play the field, and I worry his bat may not be good enough to be a DH. And Melendez, and by the way, we should point out a couple of nice developments this week. The Royals basically put his catching career on hold, which is something you and I have been talking about for a long time. And they kind of acknowledge the same reasons that you and I talked about. It's not that he necessarily can't catch,
Right?
but it's clearly it's clearly inhibiting his offensive development. And if he's not a great defensive catcher and he's not hitting well, then what's the point? Like he needs to learn to do one thing at a time. And he's catching this year. His catching numbers were better than before, but they couldn't possibly have been worse. And I just feel like they were trying to have their cake and eat it too, having this like guy who can catch and hit, and they were ending up with nothing. And they've got to focus on one thing. So I actually feel more optimistic that his bat will come around and he might be able to develop into at least an average defensive right fielder. Obviously, has a right fielder's arm. That's not an issue. And he's making that move at a young enough age that hopefully he'll keep his speed. I mean, he has above average speed, which is, unusual for a catcher. He's an athletic catcher, but he would have lost that fairly quickly. So give them credit for that. But when I actually rank the players who I think most likely, if I gun to my head, who do I think will be on the 2026 Royals and be a good player? After Pasquantino and Witt, you know why I have number 3 right now? It's Michael Garcia. And, not based on a ton of the major leagues, but
I'm not at all convinced that
the combination of defensive value, speed, and his offensive ability. Like, I'm not saying he's going to be a star, but I have questions about Olivares. I have questions about Melendez. I have questions about Nick Pratto. He might be right. Chris Bubich, look, would who I've got like 4th on my list here, would be great, but he's just blew out his elbow. So if I'm looking for the guy with the least number of questions, it's probably Michael Garcia at this point. That I think he'll at least be a very valuable bench piece, if not a starter.
Well, I think the 696 OPS he was sporting around in AAA is more than a question, right? The Royals have had lots of guys that make it to the big leagues with what appear to be, solid tools, only to have it never click, right? And never, we've seen what hitter the Royals have brought up, not named Salvador Perez, has exceeded their minor league numbers.
That's
right now, a lot of times guys that are in the minors for a long time, you can, give it the 80% of their minor league numbers will be what their big league numbers are, 90%, something like that. But there are plenty of players, the Jeff Bagwells, who had 7 home runs in the minor leagues his entire minor league career, and then went on to hit 500 when it was all said and done. There are plenty of guys that the organizations promote them up, and their best years are their big league years because the organizations see the talent where it is. That never happens with the Royals. Never.
That's one of our central frustrations. That's the whole
Salvador
1,500 plate appearances mantra is because the Royals they have to come up with an excuse for the fact that the players never do that.
Yes.
And Salvi he's the exception that proves the rule.
And if you want to add another guy, I don't know, maybe Billy Butler, but Alex Gordon didn't hit as well.
I mean, it took years to develop. Gordon got there for briefly, but it was like his
5 minutes
season. Well, but the bigger thing is it took Joe's 5th season. It shouldn't have to take that long.
Right.
And so Billy Butler at least was what we expected. Pasquantino to me is what we expected, maybe even a little better than what we expected. I don't know if his numbers are better than in AAA, but they're basically the same when he had amazing numbers in AAA. So that's one of the reasons why I'm so high on Vinny.
But to me, the point of the exercise is to figure out what the hell you have, right? To be honest about what you have, right? You have potential in Garcia. You have potential. You can name a bunch of guys down to the minor leagues that are potentially good. The only guys could be in a lineup in an American League Championship Series are Salvador Perez, still, not old Perez, now Perez, right. Salvador Perez, Bobby Witt Jr., and Vinny Pasquantino. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, basically.
I'm bullish on MJ Melendez being that bat, but you're going to have to work with me on how it fits. I have optimism on Nick Pratto that they will figure out the bat and they will get some lift and live with the strikeouts and, Brent Rooker it. Let's see. I know we got into it about Brent Rooker, but, those things, JD Martinez, guys have reworked Jacob Turner. Let's get to work on it, right? Let's get some lift in the swing and you can live with the strikeouts if the ball is going over the wall. There's a pedigree there. But not much else, right? Not much else. Is Darren Blanco, Gerard Dyson? Maybe, but he's no more. I talked with some people today about him, and there is not a whirlwind about. He's 30 years old for one.
Right. I was going to say Gerard Dyson was in the majors for 5 years at that point.
Gerard Dyson didn't hit the majors till he was older.
He was 26. There's a bit of and he was actually one of those rare players who came up and immediately played better than he did in the minor leagues.
Yes.
I didn't think he was a prospect because he had no pop in the minors. I saw him for 2 weeks in the majors. I'm like, this is a better player than I was, led to believe. And that's a fun thing. I'm getting a little bit of those vibes with Michael Garcia. That's maybe why I have him on the side.
Okay.
Maybe I'm just getting a little ahead of myself, and maybe I'm just so starved for a Royals player who doesn't come up and immediately disappoint.
Well, the new trend is they come up and they have this hot 5 days and then nothing. Right? That's their new thing, which is what we're seeing with Pratto, right? Garcia's hitting better now than he was in the minor leagues, and maybe he's going to be that guy. And I'm okay. There is a good pedigree. They have been very big. They brought him up when other guys had better numbers for a reason, right? So we'll see where it's going. They brought Prado up to run around the outfield for a little bit, now playing first base. But they brought him up over guys that were hitting better, one of which was Blanco, for a reason. There's something there that they like, that they appreciate, and let's just hope it's not his, ability to read scripture. I'm just going to be blunt. I think those days are over, but
Speaking of that, Gavin Cross is hitting 180 in high A ball right now.
Yes,
I
know.
If I had to rank him now, I would put Caden Wallace as the top prospect. He at least is having a good year.
Who on the mound when this team is contending, which you're calling 25?
26. I'd love 25, but we're saying 3 years from now, 2026.
Okay, 26. Okay. Yeah. Who is?
So the guys I've got on this list. So they're still they will not have reached free agency. I've got Bubic. Right. I mean, again, none of these are sure things by any means. But if I had to bet on somebody, what we saw from Bubic, before his injury, if he comes back with that stuff.
Yeah, but that's an if. If right there.
Yeah, they're all ifs.
Cross them off.
Who do I feel comfortable about?
You can't say if. What are the building blocks? What is they're contending? You've put it in 26. You know that this guy is in the middle of it.
I don't think I can say I know about anybody.
Not one.
A month ago, I would have said. A month ago, I would have said Brady Singer. And actually, I mean, if you talk about all the disappointments this season, Brady Singer has to be at the top of that list. Now, I am hopeful. He had a very weird spring training, being at the World Baseball Classic, not pitching all that much. His velocity is down like a mile and a half, and he may be going through some dead arm stuff that you normally go through, in spring training. I think that may have hit him in like mid-April. So I certainly don't think that he's completely wiped out. Like he could adjust and get back to where he was last year. But right now, I'm very worried about Brady Singer. Like Brady Singer was the only pitcher in this organization that I didn't like when you talk about foundational blocks that I was confident in saying he was a foundational block. He is not at the top of the list anymore until I know what the heck is wrong with him right now.
There's no one. There's literally no one. My money would be on Brady Singer because we did have 100 plus innings, sustained, real looking stuff. Okay, so Brady Singer is where I would put my money, but I'm not even convinced we saw enough out of 2 outings out of Chris Bubic does not a pillar make. And now coming off Tommy John, I'd love to believe it. Now, if you want to tell me, okay, if you want to say who could be, well, Freddie Fermin could be.
Freddie Fermin, you talk about a guy who comes up better than you expect. The other player who fits that profile is Whit Merrifield, which is a good comp, is an interesting comp just because Merrifield was 27 when he reached the majors. Such, very unusual to be that old and make it and still actually have a long career. Freddie Fermin is almost 28. He came up last year very briefly during the Toronto series and didn't even get a hit. He didn't get his first major league hit until a couple weeks ago when he turns 28 next month. But if you look at his minor league numbers, his slugging average has basically gone up every single year of his career in the minor leagues. And he's hit some bombs. I mean, it's a very small sample size, but is he qualified to be a backup catcher? Absolutely. Which is why I think MJ Melendez, they felt more comfortable just saying, okay, you're a right fielder for the time being, because I think they kind of want to see, and they should want to see, what can Freddie Fermin do as a backup catcher.
Garcia could be a utility guy. Nate Eaton could be a utility guy. Olivares, no. He's never going to field well enough. I don't see it there with him. And so anything you can get in a trade, Bubic, Singer, whatever category we want to put him in.
Bubic, Singer, I have Lynch there as well, and we're going to see him in the next week or two, hopefully in the major leagues. So I mean, as long as we're talking about ifs, I might as well put the guy that
on our last go round with Lynch. Last go round.
Surprisingly, I didn't realize this myself. Lynch actually came up the year after Singer and Bubic. He's actually a year has 1 year less service time than both of them. They got to the majors in 2020. He didn't get to the majors.
Which puts him into arbitration next year.
Possibly, he's going to be on the border. But so
he's
what?
Probably going to be hurt all year. That's probably what's going to happen. He's going to come back, start, leave the game with tightness, and go get surgery. That's almost
And when he does, we can be furious about it then. I've got so many things to be furious about right now. I'm not gonna play Minority Report here and put somebody in jail for a pre-crime. So
yeah. But but that's really it, because you can't hang your hat on any bullpen guy ever lasting for more than 3 years. If they're really good, they
yeah.
shouldn't last. They should blow their arm out because they're throwing such wicked crap. That's what happens.
The closest I have to that in the majors is Carlos Hernandez. Just because he throws so hard. But am I betting on any of those guys? No. If I had to bet, or if I had to honestly, if I had to gun to my head, one other pitcher besides Lynch, Bubich, Singer, who in 3 years will be on this roster and be decent, you know who would be my next guy on the list? Frank Mazzucato.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's
I
right.
actually,
I
it's
don't want to leave
interesting.
Carlos Hernandez too fast, because let me tell you, in 26, the only thing he will win is a wing eating contest. Okay, so like and the world has been filled with many a pitcher that's calorically challenged.
I was going to say, as a reliever, that's not necessarily a career ender. We just
But it's not a positive sign to have not
no, it's
established
not.
yourself and already be battling the belt.
Yeah, no, that's
And I'm just gonna,
absolutely a fair point. I think it's best that he's in the bullpen now. Let's put it that way.
yeah, for sure. But so I think at the end of this exercise, where I'm at is this needs to be a lot of movement. There needs to be a lot of movement, a lot of things moving around.
Absolutely.
And I think if you want to do what's best for the organization, you will be jettisoning much. And if you want to be the one to finish this, you will begin jettisoning now. I think JJ Picollo has to be super active at the deadline. And I think he's probably going to have to move some of the names that we're talking about being maybes as parts of throw-ins. And I think the owner is going to listen. I'm hearing that the August vote has now been, as I think all of us, I was not the only guy to say this, but when they were talking about like wanting to get a vote done in 26, I was like, you're smoking the ganj. I'll be happy to admit, which is now legal, by the way, in Missouri. I'll be happy to admit I'm wrong. When I'm wrong, I'm not wrong. And they're already now all the way to there's a November vote they could go fall back to from the August vote. It's not usually where you want to put that on that. It's usually an April or August vote. They're now targeting the spring of 24.
Well, when you start 9-26, did you expect people to come out and give you money? That's
Well, but it's not even that. It's just like they're starting to understand what all is involved,
right.
what all they have to do. That's maybe we'll do a stadium update, and I'll give some stuff on that. But they're not hip to what all is actually involved in that, and so that's part of the equation as well there. So I think what would be best is for this front office to convince ownership that, look, this is where we're going, this is how we're going to get there, and this is what it's going to be, and we're going to move a lot of these pieces, and you're not going to get a lot back for them. Like the whole Scott Barlow thing, I don't know what people think Scott Barlow is. Like, I mean, I still don't get, like, I know you've said it, if they were tanking, they would have moved Scott Barlow again, because why? Like, he's nails back there. That part, I don't even see that. But I think what has to happen now is if the owner wasn't already on board, and the owner in Sam McDowell's column last week called it an evaluation year. It's the first time he's really just waved the white flag and said it's not going to happen. And I think that's significant, because I think it's possible that he is, just said, okay, it's not going to happen.
It's significant, but I would feel a lot better about that if I had heard that before the season began, because
But at least you're hearing it, and you're
I'm
not hearing somebody who's going to kid themselves into thinking a couple of Band-Aids and some Scotch tape
okay.
is
Well,
going to put this thing in the divisional hunt next year.
well, when you have the 9-26 record, like that is such a low bar. That bar is on the floor to say, oh, this isn't our year. If you're 9-26, you're still thinking you can fix that. No, you have much more existential questions, which is, can the people I have in the front office now fix this period? Because they're the people who built this team that are 9-26, and that's why, yes, they have to be honest with themselves, and JJ needs to move a lot of guys for future value. But this is the worst case scenario, Soren. this season. And maybe there's time to change to turn things around. But right now, this is the worst.
It
This
can
is worse than you
always
and I.
get worse. Buddy Bell
It
talk.
yes, it can. And I'm not saying it's the worst of all possible worlds, but I'm saying this is worse than you and I even contemplated before the season. It's bad enough that it has to make us and it has to make ownership question what they thought they knew about the people that are running this team. And so if JJ goes, if there was a conversation before the season, or after he got hired, after he got the real job at last August or early September, it was. If there was a conversation between JJ and the owner, and JJ was open about this team doesn't have the talent, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Okay, he's justified, and I'll give him a pass for the way this season's played out. Only him and John Sherman know this for sure. But based on some of the moves they made this winter, I don't get the impression that he thought this team was this bereft of talent. And so, based on that, based on the way that so many of these players are not taking a step forward and are taking a step backwards, not just the pitchers, but we're talking about the hitters too. MJ Melendez is not having a good year at the plate. Bobby Witt is not really moving forward. Michael Massey is finally starting to draw some walks, and his numbers aren't a complete abomination, but they're pretty damn bad. And then the much vaunted pitching makeover that you and I raved about and for 2 weeks looked really good. They've taken a tiny step forward, but just a tiny step. And I don't know if that's just a bad reflection on the coaching, or it's just that the talent was even worse than we thought.
Are you convinced? Let's go over what they need, right? Are you convinced Bobby Witt Jr. is a shortstop?
No,
Are you
I'm not.
convinced he's a shortstop or a center fielder?
I really, one of the things what I came to the conclusion when I was kind of doing this project is that the Royals are really weak in the outfield. And I really feel like putting
You
Bobby Witt in
think?
center. Yeah, but it's
Well
like,
done, Cluzo.
yeah, thank you. I've 8 years of higher education for this for these takes you're getting here. But I've been saying third base for a long time, but recently I've been saying more and more maybe center field. And honestly, I mean if I believe in Michael Garcia as much as I do, and he could be a shortstop, and Bobby Witt's in center. I mean, you build up the middle,
Yes.
and if the Royals have
Well,
some.
I not to interrupt you, and I'm sorry, but that's where it starts to look better if Garcia's real and plays it short, and Bobby Witt goes out to center, and you have Salvador Perez and or MJ Melendez, who's played better defensively. To his point, like if they would trade Salvador Perez, eat a bunch of money, get back quality prospects, move MJ Melendez behind the dish, Felix Fermin backing him up. That and Melendez is catching well, and Fermin is aces defensively. You have a nice combination of those, and Melendez can DH a little bit, and then you have Michael Garcia's grab shortstop and has proven that he is a major league everyday shortstop. And Bobby Witt Jr. goes out to center field and takes to it the way Brian McRae took to it when he went from second base to center field, and takes to it the way Alex Gordon took to left field, and he takes to center field. It looks so much better.
I agree.
It looks so much better. And and if you are not signing Bobby Witt Jr. right now, then you're not sure. And if you're not sure, you're going to lose the window to sign him very soon, because once he gets to the arbitration years, there's almost no point in him signing. So at that point, pitter patter, let's get at her. Get him out to the outfield. Start making this thing look like it fits.
Right.
And that's the only way it does.
Well, that's why when they said, okay, Melendez, you're no longer catching right now, like they were starting to make those decisions, the hard decisions of what does this lineup actually look like? Bringing up Michael Garcia, how much better does the team look with him in the lineup instead of Hunter Dozier? Even though he's playing third base, even though it's kind of weird, he's playing third and Witt's playing shortstop when I think they should be flip flop. But having him out there, he made a really good play on a bunt the other day. Like he's, quietly, the Royals' defense this year has been terrible. The defensive metrics are really, really bad. And
Yes.
that makes the pitching look that much worse. And it's like, I thought we were trying to build around defense. I
Which
guess
is
not.
exactly which, and to me, I look at I look at Matt Quatraro, and again, I understand why they went down this road with Bobby Witt Jr. and that you want to give him the whole year. I really do. And if they give him the whole year, I'm not going to freak out. But no battle plan survives combat. We talk about that all the time, and it was a good plan. But if you're like, look, we want to develop pitching. You can't develop pitching, and you can't get anyone to come pitch here. Greinke and Lyles are not as bad as they look. Nobody can catch the freaking ball. Okay, everything is an extra base. Everyone's almost catches it at the wall. It's ridiculous. Like we judge the outfield defense around here like we're watching D League softball. Oh, he had to run a long way. No, it's the big leagues. If you get near it, you catch it. Okay. You know, it's
We
like,
just
oh,
honored
but he was
we just
running and he had to look up. You mean like at a fly ball? That's what you do.
we just honored a player who had to run a long way and then made the catch
Yes.
every time, and that's
Yes.
why we love him. If you're going to
Um,
run, running is it's part of the job. So just go get the ball.
so there was a couple of things on here I want to just address. So we said, Bobby, here we go. He said, watch Bobby Witt track back on shallow flies from short makes me hopeful for him in the outfield. Okay.
Absolutely.
I agree. I think he's just a natural athlete, and I think playing in the dirt is hard, right? Like he can play third, or he can play. If he can play decent short, he'll play a better third. Would be my assumption, but I think he can play center field. That is a transition that we've seen Robin Yount make. I mentioned Brian McRae, Alex Gordon. We've seen it. There's a lot of
Somebody
reasons to
mentioned
believe.
A-Log 1234 mentioned Jazz Chisholm. The Marlins moved out to center field. That's actually another good example, going from the dirt and taking a
Yes,
guy.
yes,
Speed matters. Like Bobby is such a fast player. Speed is a nice thing to have in the middle infield. But you know what? Some of the best shortstops defensively were not really fast players. And Dalton Simmons is the best defensive shortstop since Ozzie Smith. He wasn't a burner. Like
right.
the best defensive shortstop the Royals may have ever had was Ray Sanchez. We talked about him over the winter on our all-time Royals team, and that dude stole like 3 bases a year. But like just great first step, great anticipation, very smooth, and it's the footwork and handwork together, right? It's being able to feel the ball, plant your feet, throw on a run. You know, in the center field, it's all about speed, and Bobby
Well,
is one of the
and he's
fastest
got
players in
it.
the game.
And he's
Yeah.
got it. Absolutely. He's got it. And so, like, at some point, this organization has to say, look, do you want to win? Like, and maybe we'll sign you, maybe we won't. But if you want to win, this is what we need to do. And so if you put him in center field, even if what you do is go with Nicky Lopez at short, because Garcia can't do it, and then you start catching the baseball. How does the rest of it fit together? Caden Wallace is hitting. I'm never convinced that a second rounder is the answer, but to this point, he is still looking like a prospect in his hitting. That is your
And
potential.
I've seen at least good defensive like videos of him playing good defense at third base. Like, look, we're dreaming here. Everything is a fantasy at this point. But Caden
Well,
Wallace might be the starting third baseman by next summer 2024.
right.
That would be a best case scenario here.
They need to figure out what Nick Lofton is. I'm not convinced he's anything more than a utility player because I don't know that the hit tool is there. But if Caden Wallace fits in at third, past Coutinho at first, and you hold that for the DH part of the equation for him as well, and if Prado's going to be in that mix, I don't see Prado there. I don't think he's ever going to hit.
This is the evaluation year for him, and we can talk about Nick Prado because you know there are definitely some great tools there, right? I mean, the power in the minor leagues, the defense at first base. The problem was even after remaking his swing in the minor leagues like 3 years ago, he still struck out way too much. And what's interesting is this year he went down to the minor leagues and his raw numbers were pretty terrible. He's hitting like 159. They called him up anyway, which could be a sign of desperation or could be a sign that they were having to work on some things because his strikeout, even though his batting average was dropped at 159, his strikeout rate, which has always been over 30% in the minors and was like 35 to 40 last year in the majors, and which is just, you cannot survive with that kind of a strikeout rate, had dropped down to 21%. In AAA when they called him up. And then, of course, he called up and he's hitting, 3 350 or something like that. But his strikeout rate has gone way up. What I'm looking though, what's very interesting about his profile in the major leagues, it's a small sample size. He's actually swinging less this year than last year, which is surprising to me because he was one of the guys who was almost too patient at the plate. He would take a lot of called strikes, and he's not swinging anymore. But last year, he swung at pitches outside the strike zone 28% of the time. He's down to 23. He's chasing a lot less. And this year, his contact rate in the strike zone, which was only 77 runs, he was swinging through pitches, hittable pitches last year at 77%. His contact rate of pitches in the zone has gone up to 85%. There's definitely something going on with his swing. And I give the Royals credit because I think that the Nick Pratto we saw last year, while a better player than he was 3 years ago, was not going to make it as a first baseman in the majors. This Nick Pratto might. I don't know, but I think we need to give it a couple of 100 plate appearances to find out.
I think he's Doug Minkiewicz. And I think that's a guy that could serve a role on a winning team, but he's not going to be one of the pillars. By the way, we're brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, yes. No commissions, that's correct. In-house crews, yes. Every project comes with a written warranty. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Or call 816-484-3338, Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. So at the end of the day, in my opinion, they need a left fielder. They need a right fielder. They need potentially a shortstop. They need a second baseman. They have catcher. They have first. Potentially, I think they have third.
They need about 11 pitchers.
They have center field if Bobby Witt Jr. goes there. And I think they need, 4 starting pitchers, right? But there are some possibilities. Singer, Lynch, Bubic are all still possibilities. But really only Lynch, I think, would still be under contract based upon service time.
In 2026, I think they actually all are. Singer and Bubic would be free agents after 2026. Remember, Singer didn't get the full year of free agency last year. He went down to the minors for a couple weeks.
Okay, you're right.
Oh,
so
Lynch is around through 2027, whereas Bubic and Singer 2026. So
okay.
That's I think that's another reason to target that year as a year where they could actually try to make the playoffs.
And presumably later this year with Singer, or in 24, Singer, Bubic coming off, would show themselves, and you're looking to buy some time in a free agency and get them signed. But I mean, when I see that again, if center field is filled with a 30-30 bat, and Adam Jones, which is what I ran by you the other day, like, would you take this? Because I think that's kind of the profile that I'm seeing now. It starts to look better. I can start to see, because you can find a left fielder that can hit you 25 home runs. You can find a right fielder that can do the same thing. You can find a shortstop to glove it. Right? Go back. Ray Sanchez did that for the Royals back in the day. You can find that guy. You'd like to have the all-around guy. You'd like Garcia to grab that. And if he does grab it, now we're cooking. Right? Now you're starting to say, okay, up the middle, we're good. And you can find the outsides, right? Through trade, what have you. But you're going to have to develop some pitching. So let's go to that part of the equation. Is the new approach working in the minor leagues?
Maybe.
Okay.
If you want to find a positive spin on the Royals this year, and certainly positive spin on the whole coaching transformation, and we're teaching pitching differently, you're not going to find it at the major league level, unfortunately. We thought we had it at the major league level for about 2 weeks till Bubic hurt his elbow, and then Brad Keller fell apart for like the 4th year in a row, and that's about it. Some of the bullpen guys are pitching better, but still, major leagues, you're not seeing success. If you go down to AAA is all you need to know about the Royals AAA team is that
they're old.
Well, they're old, but also
really
like
old.
The Royals, the closest thing to a success story was probably Austin Cox, who, congratulations to him, made his major league debut, pitched well. They sent him back down because they needed a fresh arm, basically. And who did they call up? They called up Jonathan Heasley, who had a 9.00 ERA in Omaha. He got into a game. They sent him back down. They needed a fresh arm. So this time they called up Max Castillo, whose ERA is only 6.66. So he maybe the sign of the apocalypse, or he may just be on the team for a couple of days, one or the other. But the point is, they have nothing in AAA. It is, and that's okay in a sense, because those are the guys you stash, who you keep there as in an emergency, who are major league ready, quote unquote, but are not actually the prospects. Like of course, Jackson Kowar is down there. He has an ERA over 8. So there's yet to be any success stories there. Omaha has the second worst ERA of the entire, whatever they call this, the international league now. They keep changing the league names. There's like 20 teams, I think, in the league. They have the second worst ERA in the league. So you're not going to find success there. But let's keep moving. Double A, the Northwest Arkansas, they have a 3.53 ERA, second best in their league, the Texas League, which is, I think, 10 teams. Yeah, 10 teams. And their ERA is a full point better than third place. Like, there's basically 2 teams in that league that can pitch. And if you look at the Royals Double A stats and some of the prospects, I'm going to throw some names out here. There's a lot of pitchers in the system. Anthony Veneziano, 3 walks and 37 strikeouts. He's a lefty who 2 years ago briefly looked like a real prospect, had a disappointing year last year. 3 walks, 37 strikeouts. Christian Chamberlain, I think you mentioned him a couple podcasts ago. 4th round pick. He's a short lefty reliever, but throws really hard. In 14 innings, 5 walks, 25 strikeouts. This is a guy who couldn't throw strikes at all last year. But the big name here, Alec Marsh, who's on the 40-man roster. And frankly, at the rate he's going, might actually be somebody they give a spot in the rotation to by the end of the year. Last year, he stayed healthy. The stuff was supposedly there. He had a 7.32 ERA. He struck out 11.5 batters per 9 innings, but in 114 innings, he gave up 27 home runs. This year, in 25 innings, 0 homers, 6 walks, 29 strikeouts. His ERA is 2.88. You watch video of these guys pitching. The one thing that really stands out, I mean, you don't have to be a scout to notice this. They are using the high fastball in a way that Royals minor leaguers never did before. They're getting strikeouts. They're getting guys to swing and miss up in the zone. That is a definite conscious change throughout the organization. And, some guys are taking well to this. So Alec Marsh looks like they may have fixed him. It's still early, but I'm excited about that. But the real interesting stuff is down in A-ball, where I mentioned Mazzucato, right? Mazzucato, I think he's got 41 strikeouts in 24 innings.
You're going all the way to low A.
Well, I mentioned I'll go back to high.
What is now A, not A plus?
Right. Let's say high A for first. Noah Cameron, who's a lefty who they drafted in the 7th round, coming off Tommy John surgery 2 years ago. So we got healthy last year, looked really good. He's an high A ball, 42 whiffs in 25 innings. I mentioned Mason Barnett. I think he was on minor league minute last year. 3rd round pick last year. It was a surprising pick. It wasn't rated that high by the draft gurus. 33 strikeouts in 25 innings, 2.49 ERA. So he's looking good. I'll just mention very briefly: Luinder Avila and Chandler Champlin. Chandler Champlin was the 3rd guy in the Andrew Benintendi trade. I should point out Beck Way, who was the best of those guys, he's basically broken. He's 19 walks and 7 strikeouts. He's on the Asa Lacy plan right now. So there are certainly some.
And the Yankees told him that he would never be a big leaguer. And everybody in the Royals organization, right? He's the one they told, you're not good enough, but if you do well enough, we might be able to trade you to somebody. But you'll never be a big leaguer for us.
Not hear that. Well,
sure that's the story.
Well, right now he doesn't look like it, but Chandler Champlin, the 3rd guy, looking decent. And as a whole, though, the high A ball, the Quad City River Bandits are in middle of the pack in ERA. But then you get down to low A ball. And this is where, if you really want to be optimistic, the Columbia Fireflies, the world's low A ball team, are first in their 12-team league in ERA by 50 points. And it's not an old team. Like the average age of that of their pitching staff is 21.7. The league average is 21.8. So it's not like a bunch of old college dudes beating up on young competition. The top 5 guys on the Columbia Fireflies in strikeouts, their ages are 20. 22, 21, 22, and 20. Mazzucato was there. Shane Panzini, has kind of taken a step forward a little bit this year. He was the third of the 3 high school arms the Royals took in the 2021 draft. And then Ben Cadurta started really badly. His last 2 outings have been scoreless, 11 scoreless innings. He's coming around a little bit. And then I mentioned Steven Zobak last week. This is the reliever they took last year in the 4th round. He's faced 38 batters as a pro and struck out 23 of them. So you have a 61% strikeout rate. That would be historic. Like nobody in the major leagues has been above out 51. And then the minor league minute guy for this week, I'll mention, is David Sandlin, who was the 11th round pick last year, college pitcher, I think out of Oklahoma. And the 11th round is important because remember, the guys in the first 10 rounds are part of the draft, your money pool. So a lot of times teams will draft guys in the 9th, 10th rounds and sign them for like $5,000 because they want to use that. They want to allocate that money somewhere else. And then in the starting 11th round, they go back and they can sign guys for up to 125 grand without accounting against their pool. So a lot of times the 11th round is actually better prospects than guys taking 2 or 3 rounds earlier. But this guy's taken a major step forward with his stuff. He's throwing upper 90s and he's struck out 39 batters in 24 innings. Like the strikeout rates here, more than the ERAs, more than anything else. The Royals are actually emphasizing missing bats for the first time.
And is that because they've sent the like, hey, it's a lost cause. Let's start with the guys that we're getting our first crack at. And everything beyond that's a lost cause. Or they're having to deprogram and reprogram, and these guys are getting the programming initially. And
I think that's the optimistic view here. The optimistic view here is it's much easier to fix somebody who's young, who's impressionable, who's still learning the craft. And the 29-year-old journeyman in AAA is beyond fixing, right? Like that is the positive spin on this. That is what I'm hoping. The negative spin is when that this is exactly how we felt about Singer and Bubic and Lynch and Kowar when they were in A-ball 3 or 4 years ago, right? Like these guys are just pitching at a lower level. It's not as competitive, and the Royals method works at that level, but it won't work as they move up the system. I am hopeful that's not the case because they are doing things differently. But the sad reality is we won't know for at least a year or 2 whether or not this is fool's gold or not. But if you're looking for a reason to believe that the Royals have made changes for the better in pitching development, you would think pitching development would start at the lowest levels. And at the lowest levels, they are getting results that I have not seen from this organization in many years.
Agreed. Because they're throwing strikeout pitches, right? They're not trying to.
One thing that's really interesting, why is Frank Mazzucato, his strikeout rate gone up? One of the things I've heard is they're letting him throw his curveball more. Like his best pitch, he was drafted because he doesn't throw particularly hard. He's a lefty who, and even this year, I think his velocity may be up a little bit, but just a little. He's still throwing 90, 91. But he was drafted because he had this freakish curveball. For so long, what was the Royals' philosophy? It was develop your other pitches. Fastball command, even if your fastball wasn't your best pitch. Meanwhile, you look at what teams like the Rays would do. It's like, oh, you throw a really, really, really good slider. Throw it 70% of the time. All right? Here's a fascinating stat that I just recently learned. What percentage of pitches in 2008, 15 years ago, you want to guess what percentage of overall pitches thrown in the major leagues in the year 2008 were sliders?
In 2008?
2008.
Oh, I'm going to say it's like 15%.
14%. Exactly. What do you think it is this year?
I think you were probably like 45.
Not quite that high. 14% to 24%.
Okay.
Right. But the point is
but I bet if you look at it on breaking balls
might be
curveballs are up.
I think the slider is interesting. I do think actually one of the ways the Royals have been behind the curve is that they have always obsessed about the curveball. And I get the just from an aesthetic standpoint, there's no slider as pretty as a Clayton Kershaw curveball. There's something beautiful about a curveball. And I'm very excited to see the Frank Mazzucato curveball, right? The slider, when it was first invented, really, it was derided as, but they called it the nickel curve because like you didn't get this big break to it. But what matters is, do you miss bats? And the slider misses bats. And think about that. The percentage of pitches thrown in the majors that are specifically the slider, it's almost doubled in the last 15 years because you have pitchers now. It's like if they have a really good slider, they'll throw it 50, 60% of the time.
Yeah.
I remember the first guy I can think of who really made it in the majors with nothing but a slider was Sergio Romo. I don't know if you remember Sergio Romo with the
Sure.
Giants. He was like a 36th round pick. His fastball was like never more than like 89, 90 miles an hour. And I remember he got to the major leagues, never heard of this guy. And from his rookie year, he was just dominant. And he would throw his slider 60 or 70% of the time. And, so many of the things that we thought we knew about pitching for 100 years turned out to be wrong. One of them was you can't throw a breaking ball that often. The batters will, figure it out. And it turns out, no, they if it's good enough, you can do that. And so one of the things the Rays do is like, this is your best pitch. Keep throwing it. The problem with trying to develop all your other pitches and specifically fastball command is you can lose your best pitch. Like if instead of focusing on your best pitch, you're focusing on your worst pitch, you might lose the feel on your best pitch.
Yeah,
And
which has happened to them. Danny Duffy's repertoire changed
yeah,
because he didn't have the
so
feel
many
anymore.
times I'm worried that might be happening with Brady Singer a little bit. Brady Singer, it's too early to panic, but the point is like as much as you and I want him to throw a changeup, and he's throwing it more. If he loses the bite on his slider, it doesn't matter how good his changeup is, right? So I think what I've heard is Mazzucato last year, he had this great curveball, but they were like emphasizing all these other things, which great. You want to be a complete pitcher, but you know what? You can survive in the majors with 2 pitches. You don't have to have 3 pitches if they're dominant. As much as you and I want Brady Singer to have that third pitch, he's done just fine throughout his career throwing 2 pitches 93, 94% of the time because they're really good. And so I find that really interesting that Mazzucato is just like, they're like, throw the hell out of that curveball. Whatever you do, don't lose that curveball.
Yeah.
And I think, and A-ball hitters are just completely overmatched. He's not even 20. He's 19. He'll be 20 in a month. He might be in high A-ball by the time he turns 20. And, this time next year, he might be in AA ready, and we might be all like salivating, waiting for him to reach the major leagues when he's like 21 years old.
We are brought to you here at the Kaufman Corner by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Whether you're looking to join one of the best teams in Kansas City, they're hiring paid time off, insurance, just to name a couple of the benefits, up to $30 per hour. All jobs open. And go to GannAsphalt.com. Or your business needs help. Listen, if you've got a bad parking lot, leaving a bad taste in your customers or client's mouth, let the first thing they see about you be the most perfect parking lot you've ever seen. That's what Gann Asphalt Concrete does. Check them out right now online at GannAsphalt.com. For the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli. He may be frustrated. Still the best when it comes to breaking down the Royals. My name is Soren Petro, saying thank you very much for joining us